This is a car named after an Icelandic volcano and wrapped around a bespoke 7-litre quad-turbo V12 engine. It's also made just down the road from the likes of Pagani, Ferrari and Lamborghini. This is a Giamaro Krafla, and it is quite insane. Why so insane? Well, Giamaro reckons that this engine, in its highest performing format, produces 2,127 brake horsepower and nearly 1,500 pounds-feet of torque. Which means I suspect it might be quite fast, even if it is just rear-wheel drive, which means it might be bonfiring its tyres all the way past 200 miles an hour. So that sort of stuff makes you think that this might be verging on the vaporware. Except that Giamaro already has prototypes up and testing.
Just for reference, the guy behind the wheel of the prototype and the development of the car is none other than Loris Bicocci, the man that did the quad-turbo Bugatti EB110, the Veyron and the Chiron, plus a load of other work for Lamborghini, Koenigsegg and Pagani. Maybe not so much vapor after all.
Now, obviously, one of the most intriguing things about this car is that bespoke engine, because it's not borrowed from another car manufacturer. It's a 7-litre V12 with 1, 2, 3, 4 turbos, all placed within the hot V of the engine, and apparently capable of some really wild power figures. But more than that, in an age of electrification and hybrids, that is just cool. But you don't have to drive around with 2,000 plus brake horsepower all of the time, or you'd be driving about like both of your feet were broken. So there is a white key, specifically for between 400 and 800 horsepower via a boost controller, which is obviously for town work. And then there's a black key, which unleashes 1,650 brake horsepower, which is obviously for town and country. And then there is a final red key that unleashes the full 2,127. Now all of that drives through a 7-speed Cima gearbox, which you can have with either a manual shift or paddles, and it's in a transaxle layout. Now all a transaxle means is that the transmission and the axle are all in one unit, and it saves space, so it's common in cars where the engine is the same end as the driven wheels. But Giamaro also has an 11-speed DSG gearbox in the works, and that's going to take some concentration to remember which gear you're in.
But who's behind this glorious madness? And why, in a world that seems less keen on wantonly burning dinosaurs, do such a mad engine? And how on earth would you get it to pass emissions regulations? Time to hear from the boss, who used to be a founding partner at none other than Pagani.
Krafla è il più grande sogno che avevo nel cassetto. Sono riuscito a farlo già una volta con Pagani Automobili quando ero socio fondatore anche di Pagani Automobili. Poi ci siamo separati e io ho riportato a galla questo sogno che avevo da quando ero bambino, il sogno di costruire un'automobile con una visceralità e con un'anima che non riesco a vedere da nessun'altra parte.
Is it possible to make all of this work? Well, that's yet to be decided, but it sounds like this. Now this is the engineering prototype, but it is all working. And even though we're in a warehouse, it does sound chunky. And even with the turbos, you can still tell it's a V12.
Sicuramente una vettura deve esprimere il suo potenziale e quella che è la sua anima. Avere un Hypercar senza un V12 secondo me è avere un Hypercar non completa. È uno dei nostri segreti, è uno dei nostri brevetti, lo scoprirete entro la fine dell'anno, ma sicuramente passeremo brillantemente le emozioni perché la macchina è omologata per il mondo.
So it's got some secret emissions wrangling stuff that we're yet to find out about, which is interesting. But what about the rest of the car? That's a 170 kilogram carbon monocoque under there, with aluminium crash structures at either end, which is quite common for this sort of thing. But all told, it weighs under 1,500 kilograms, so it's not particularly hefty for the power outputs.
Yeah. Strip away all of that camouflage and obviously you get this. Now for me, there are influences from a lot of different hypercars, and that's quite obvious because it is mid-engine, but there's bits of Ferrari, bits of Koenigsegg, a little bit of Pagani, maybe even a bit of Ford GT, but there's some obvious aero work gone on with this car. So down here you've got some aero channels which then fire up and take the airflow over the windscreen and into the back of there. Just here, there's a couple of little details. So there's a window where you can see the onboard pushrod suspension. And then as I was moving down the car, I noticed these. So these are 10-piston calipers on carbon ceramic discs, so it should stop. But as you move down the car, you've got this kind of fighter jet canopy in the middle, which feeds these rooftop scoops. It's all quite aggressive, but quite well blended, and then a big scoop in the side. Interestingly, these top intakes feed back over what are to be the exhausts, so top surface mounted. That will make a hell of a noise, and they feed back over this active rear wing and air brake. And then at the back, it's got this kind of, I don't know, afterburner style rectangular rear lights and a big Venturi. It has got a lot of presence.
So what did they want people to think when they first looked at a Krafla? Because it's not the easiest thing to immediately fall for. So I asked Pier Francesco.
La prima cosa che voglio quando una persona guarda la Krafla è che si immagini di guidarla. Io vorrei che quando uno guarda la macchina, la prima cosa che si chieda è chissà quanto deve essere bello guidarla. Sì, deve sicuramente trasmettere visceralità, deve trasmettere emozione, ma la cosa più importante è che trasmette il desiderio di essere guidata. Ed è anche per questo che Giamaro ha le sue 3 chiavi, di cui una di queste, quella bianca, è programmabile da 400-800 cavalli per consentire anche alle persone un po' meno esperte di poterla guidare.
And then once you're inside, it's all very high-tech and fighter jetty. Now this is a show car, so it's going through the cycles on the dash. But if you look forwards, you've got this real big canopy feel. So you're looking down into those front vents, so it feels very performance, quite aggressive. But there's actually loads of headroom, and these seats are super comfortable. And if things are comfortable, people drive the cars more. Digital dash in front, and then the steering wheel's got the rev counter, so that you always know you're going to hit that 9,000 RPM red line. It's got the paddles mounted on the column, so you always know where they are. And then it's got a little touchscreen. It's not overburdened with massive screens. And then these architectural features which draw you in to where you're looking. And one of the interesting things about this car is it has a third spring on either end of the car to help with things like ride height, pitch and yaw. So you can make the car behave very differently. That's definitely something I want to try. So some of these cars feel really unfinished and like they're a bit science fiction. This actually feels quite real. I will say though that there's a lot of cool tech in here and none of it is cheap.
Dovevamo trasmettere certe emozioni, dovevamo trasmettere soprattutto ai clienti un qualcosa che vada oltre la mera configurazione estetica della vettura, e prendere componenti già esistenti o tecnologie già esistenti non ci avrebbe consentito, per esempio, di poter fare il nostro personal engineering. Noi vogliamo che una Giamaro sia un'estensione del proprio io del cliente, che sia come un prolungamento naturale delle nostre braccia quando la guidiamo. E è una cosa che abbiamo potuto raggiungere solo ed esclusivamente con delle nostre tecnologie, non derivandone da altre.
The interesting thing here is that Giamaro aren't just talking about making the Krafla bespoke in terms of paint and finishes, but how it drives. So each of the 30 customers for this €2.5 million monster can have a car that reacts in a way suited to them specifically. So one Krafla might have a super extreme track mode or very road orientated standard setup, different reactions to throttle and possibly even steering. It's supposed to be the bespoke tailored suit, not just the look, but the feel too. But that's not all. Giamaro is also looking to the future of the company with something a bit more uplifted.
Now, you may have noticed another car lurking in the background, and it's this, the Albor, named after another volcano, this time on Mars. It's the same bones as the Krafla, so the same quad-turbo V12, the same carbon tub, but kind of lifted and ruggedized. Now, anyone who knows me will know that I love a Safari/Dakar edition, and this is essentially that for the Krafla. And I think this is super quirky, and it's definitely something I drive on the daily. Okay, so we don't have production cars yet, but Giamaro has fully working prototypes out there in the world, which makes me think this is more than just a bit of pretty AI wishful thinking. And its base here in the heart of Italy's supercar valley makes me think it might just be possible. But the thing is, they don't lack for quad-turbo ambition. And for that, at the very least, they need to be applauded.